It is Thursday, November 4th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the Week 9 Preview Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaff. With me, as always, is Jared Smolin. Jared, got pushed back a little bit by family stuff today. We usually do this around noon, 1 o'clock Eastern time, but it's Thursday night. We're getting it in before the start of Jets-Colts, just before the start, though. So anybody who's not watching us live right now is probably going to already have seen that game. So we'll pretty much skip Jets-Colts on this particular preview pod, although I think that there's some stuff from that game just itching to come out of you.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to pimp Denzel Mims for your DFS showdowns. He was the Corey Davis replacement last week, actually led the Jets wide receivers and routes. I still think he's good. So if you're playing showdown, I would take a flyer on Denzel Mims tonight. Only showdown, not season long.
And apparently the Jets didn't want to trade him. So that was the word. So they must think he's still talented. And this is definitely the place to play Denzel Mims, because if it doesn't do anything for you, then you know what, you go on to the next set of showdowns. So it'll be a fun night to see if Denzel Mims does anything and if Mike White turns back into a pumpkin.
For sure. Let's move on now. We can't miss the start of a Mike White game.
That's right. Buffalo at Jacksonville to start the Sunday slate this week. The Bills by 14.5, up 1 from where it began, over under 48.5. And I mean, that says most of what we need to know about this game. On the Buffalo side, Cole Beasley did miss Wednesday's practice with a rib injury. He's coming off 2 straight big games. So, I mean, he's worth watching. We probably have a Thursday report on him now since we're doing this at night, right?
I'm sure we do. I haven't had a chance to look though. He Beasley finished out the game last week. I would expect him to be fine and probably getting some time off as a veteran. He's been great the last 2 weeks. Again, we talked about last week, I think Dawson Knox being out, and it looks like he's going to miss again. That's good news for Beasley. It means Beasley's going to be on the field basically every passing play. That was the case last week. I would go back to Emmanuel Sanders too. I know he killed you if you started him with the goose egg. He saw 4 targets. He was top 10 among all wide receivers last week in air yards. He had a deep ball that would have been like a long touchdown, but Xavier Howard just barely got a fingertip on it to break it up. So I think Sanders will be fine. The Bills passing game should have a big one here. The Jags pass defense is very, very bad.
Yeah, he's kind of getting Van Jefferson level targets. So you're going to get weeks where Emmanuel Sanders lets you down, but it's in an offense where he can hit any week. So I agree. Emmanuel Sanders at the right level certainly makes sense. He has only topped 6 targets twice in his 7 games, but I mean, it's one of the few places where we'll take a 6 target guy, and especially with a reliable veteran being that guy.
Yep.
Running backs didn't do a whole lot last week against Miami. The game, of course, was not as lopsided as the final score made it look. And maybe that was part of it. There was not a whole lot of offense in the first half, and the Bills scored 16 in the fourth quarter, their final 9 points in the last 4 minutes to make it look like it was a one-sided affair. For the game, Zach Moss, Devin Singletary split 15 carries near evenly, 8 for Moss, 7 for Singletary, but Moss got 7 of the 8 running back targets for Buffalo in that game and nearly doubled Devin Singletary's snap count.
Yeah, Moss has been getting most of the passing down work for the past few weeks now. And of course, he's still the better touchdown bet. So he's clearly the better play here. I think Singletary is in play as an RB3 or flex just because the matchup's so good and we expect the Bills to score so many points. But Moss is clearly the best fantasy play in the Bills backfield right now.
And mostly Devin Singletary is in play because there are just so few running backs that are actually attractive to use that it's somebody's going to need to use Devin Singletary this week and feel okay about it.
Exactly.
On the Jacksonville side, the biggest thing to watch, of course, is going to be James Robinson's heel to see if he's ready to play in the game. It's at least not as serious as it seemed like it might have been initially. So there does seem to be a decent chance he'll play. And I mean, Carlos Hyde, who would be the starter if James Robinson's out, he was limited Wednesday with a calf issue. And I think this is probably totally anecdotal and not backed up by anything, but it seems like over the past, 2-3 years, anytime where it's like, well, this is going to be Carlos Hyde's week because the starter's down. Of course, it was Chris Carson last week. Carlos Hyde's like, sorry, I actually have this leg thing too. You shouldn't rely on me.
Yeah, well, Hyde was a full go today, and Robinson remained sidelined. So it looks like Hyde's going to actually be ready to start this game. He actually dominated work after Robinson left. Robinson only played 8 snaps last week. Hyde ended up playing 66% of Jacksonville's offensive snaps. He got 9 of the 11 running back carries. Dari Ogunbowale was the number 2 running back last week. But Hyde also got 8 targets. He ran around on 62% of the pass play. So he kind of stepped into Robinson's role. I don't think Hyde's very good. The matchup is just about as bad as it could get. So I'm not excited about Hyde, but he does look like a decent bet for, 15 or so touches. And I think, that puts him in play if you need an option this week.
Is it really ever fair to say that Carlos Hyde is a full go, no matter how healthy or not healthy he is?
No.
Yeah, so he's definitely a guy to consider for usage. Do not consider him a lock for the lineup. I would play him over Devin Singletary, assuming James Robinson's out.
Yep.
But, I'm not going to be like, yes, Carlos Hyde's my savior this week. We'll talk about plenty of other running backs and maybe kind of compare Carlos Hyde to those guys to see who's going into lineups. The Jacksonville pass offense, just don't overtrust anybody because they let us down at Seattle. I think Marvin Jones remains the top play, but it's not like a clear number one in terms of the targets he's getting. Third in targets last week, still 10 ahead everyone else for the season. But in the 3 games since DJ Chark went down, they've had 3 full games since then. Of course, he got injured in the very beginning of that Cincinnati game. We've had 19.5% target share for Jamal Agnew, 18.8% for Marvin Jones, and 18% for tight end Dan Arnold in that span.
Yeah, Jones is still the guy I'd go to first. He's actually still 24th in our expected fantasy points per game among wide receivers over the past 4 weeks. So he's still been getting decent usage. But again, I don't expect Jacksonville's offense to have much success here. So I'm not excited about Marvin Jones. Jamal Agnew is deep PPR play. There's not much upside, but he's a decent bet for 4 to 6 catches at this point. He's taken over as the slot receiver for the Jags. They have Laviska Shenault on the outside. Shenault is just struggling on the outside. He's kind of miscast there. So I don't think you can trust Shenault in lineups right now. And Dan Arnold, he's like, you downgrade him because of this matchup. I think for the rest of the season, he's like in the low end tight end 1 mix, just based on the usage he's getting. We know the Jags going to be playing from behind a lot. There's issues in the wide receiver core. So Arnold's, going to be one of the better volume bets week to week at tight end, I think, going forward.
He's long-haired Mike Gesicki.
Perfect.
Laviska Shenault, by the way, 13.3% target share over those past 3 games without DJ Chark. So I agree. We can't use him right now. We'll see where things go. It's sad that Jamal Agnew has become Laviska Shenault, but that's where we are.
Yep.
New England at Carolina. The Patriots by 4. It's up 1.5 from where it opened. The over-under is 41. That's down 2. And that's how you should feel about this game. It's not a great spot to look for fantasy value. For the Patriots, impressive victory at the Chargers last week. But Mac Jones threw for just 217 yards, no touchdowns, 18 of 35 passing. The Panthers are a negative passing matchup this week. I would like to not have to use any pieces here. If you need somebody, Jacoby Myers remains a solid bet for target volume.
Yeah, the Patriots actually opened the season near the top of the league in situation neutral pass rate. Over the last 4 weeks now, they're 31st in situation neutral pass. It's probably like a matchup thing. Like they've just wanted to run more against their recent opponents. They played the Chargers last week. They're a run funnel defense, but it's been a run leaning offense lately that probably continues here, with Carolina's quarterback issues. So I'm not really interested in any of the passing game pieces here. Jacoby Myers, Hunter Henry are low end starting options. Damian Harris, the best play. I'd be careful overrating Harris a bit. The Patriots' last 4 games have been against Houston, Dallas, the Jets, and the Chargers. 3 of those teams ranked 23rd or worse in Football Outsiders run defense rankings. It's been an easy schedule for Harris lately. He's still okay because he's getting the volume, he's getting the goal line work. But again, I don't think he's going to produce as well as he has for the past month going forward.
And he's still light on receiving work, so that just makes his hold on production that much flimsier. Nice time to try to sell him coming off the touchdown streak. So I agree. Usable for sure, but definitely not somebody to overtrust. And Hunter Henry is really only relevant because of how weak tight end is at this point. Yep. 3 straight games now of 2 catches or fewer and less than 35 receiving yards. I wish that I had tried harder to sell Hunter Henry when he was in the midst of his touchdown streak that ended last week.
Right. He was living on the touchdowns. We also saw Jonnu Smith eat into Henry's routes a bit last week. Henry's route rate was down to 65%. Not a great number. Carolina's been pretty good against tight ends this season. Football Outsiders has them 3rd in tight end coverage. So again, Henry, an option, but again, he's basically a TD or bust fantasy option at this point.
He's like fancy Kyle Rudolph for the Patriots right now.
Yeah.
On the Carolina side, let's hope that Christian McCaffrey's back because everything else looks pretty ugly in the Carolina offense right now. Even DJ Moore is down to like wide receiver 3 level weekly averages, 5 catches, 60 yards over the past 4 games because Sam Darnold's just been garbage.
Yep, Moore is 44th among wideouts in actual fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks. He's still 4th in expected fantasy points. So the usage has been there. It's just Darnold's been so bad. I think it's going to be PJ Walker this week. Darnold was limited the first 2 days of practice with a concussion and a shoulder injury. The shoulder injury is reportedly as big a concern as the concussion. Darnold's been bad. I still think Walker's probably a downgrade. It's not good news for the passing offense. I think you still probably start more as like a wide receiver too. But we've seen the floor the past few weeks now.
Yeah, I mean, they pulled Sam Darnold at the Giants 2 weeks ago, and PJ Walker went 3 of 14 passing. So it's not like they have a closer in the bullpen and they start playing hell's bells when they bring him in. I do think that it would probably be better for everybody if Darnold doesn't play this week. Let him get healthier, let him sit out maybe, and just, I don't know, stop seeing ghosts when he comes back and give people a chance to see that things would not be better with Philip PJ Walker in the lineup. But again, I hope that we get Christian McCaffrey back because it's tough to like anything else in a Panthers uniform right now.
Yeah, Darnold's downturn in play definitely coincided with Christian McCaffrey's injury. I don't think that's the entire issue, but I think getting McCaffrey back, it's obviously going to help the offense as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Anything else from that game?
Nope.
Atlanta at New Orleans, the Saints by 6, over under of 42 here. Falcons offense stunk versus Carolina last week. And I mean, Calvin Ridley missing certainly didn't help, but that's not the whole thing because it did not stink nearly so bad against the Jets a few weeks before. The Carolina's better than the Jets, but still things are bleak at the moment. They can certainly turn around quickly. The Saints this week, though, are even better on defense than Carolina is in all areas. 3rd in overall DVOA, 5th against the pass, 2nd against the run. So if you're looking for a big Falcons rebound this week, you're going to be disappointed.
Agreed. Yeah. And I would say Atlanta only ran 50 offensive snaps last week. Part of that was because they were so bad and they weren't holding on to the ball. But that's also a super low number that you don't expect that to continue going forward. So that's going to help everyone involved. But really, it's just Kyle Pitts, and you stick with him. I mean, he is the number one option in the passing game going forward for as long as Ridley is out. So volume and talent, you're playing him. And then Cordero Patterson is still in play. We saw Mike Davis get more run last week than he did the week prior. Patterson still scored. He's still getting it done in fantasy. And then Mike Davis, he now has 9 carries. He had 9 carries and 6 targets last week. He had 13 carries and 5 targets in week 5 when Ridley was out. So his volume, I think, is going to be up for as long as Ridley is out. Not an exciting play, especially in this matchup. But again, we say that about a lot of running backs already tonight. Not an exciting play, but volume makes him an option if you're kind of desperate.
Yeah, his usage last week was right back in line with most of the season. That 4 carry outing where he played about 60% but barely touched the ball is really the outlier for his usage. Mike Davis not going to excite you any week, but he will usually get touches along the lines of what he got last week. I think I would probably take a shot on Carlos Hyde if he's starting for Jacksonville over Mike Davis, but they're in similar territory, I would say.
Yeah, I'd play Hyde. I think he's a better touch bet than Mike Davis.
And Kyle Pitts, by the way, is playing so well so far that Carolina was sicking Stephon Gilmore, the new top corner that they just got on him in coverage. That's not somebody that you're usually going to see covering a tight end.
Yeah, Pitts is basically playing wide receiver. Actually, I made that note here. The Saints have been tough against tight ends, but they're actually 31st in adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. Which I think that's the number we should kind of be looking at when looking at the matchup for Kyle Pitts, because he's running all his routes on the outside or in the slot. So it might actually be a good matchup for Pitts, even though the tight end number says it's a tough one.
Mm-hmm. Tajay Sharp, before we get away from the Falcons, has 5 and 6 targets, 4 and 5 catches in the 2 games without Calvin Ridley so far. Not big numbers, but deep league, somebody to keep in mind maybe as like a $3,000 option in DFS.
Yeah, he looks like a better bet than Russell Gage right now if you're having to mess with these Falcons wideouts.
Mm-hmm. Saints side, when I was first doing my notes, the question was, will Taysom Hill be back? Thursday afternoon, answered that question. Taysom Hill is back. He is a definite pickup this week and might just be a top 12 fantasy quarterback the rest of the way.
He was last year. He was much better than that even. He finished top 11 among quarterbacks in all 4 of his starts last season. It's funny, too. 2 of those 4 starts came against Atlanta. So he's now going to have played Atlanta in 3 of his 5 starts. He finished quarterback 3 and quarterback 7 against the Falcons last season. This Falcons defense isn't any better. So we're still waiting for the Saints to officially name Hill the starter. But assuming they do, I think he's a top 12 option this week.
Yeah, if you think that you hate hearing Taysom Hill talked about so much, just imagine how the Falcons feel about seeing his face and hearing his name. Like, when will this guy go away? I would be shocked if they start Trevor Siemian over Taysom Hill. But we were shocked last year when it was Taysom Hill over Jameis Winston.
True.
Otherwise, with New Orleans, really just Alvin Kamara. I mean, I think you can take a shot in some places on Mark Ingram in a deep league. He got 6 of 25 running back carries last week in his first game with the team just a few days after the trade, and 2 of 6 running back targets, which is, a decent number considering the shares, 2 targets versus 4 for Alvin Kamara in that game against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, we expect the Saints to lean, I'd say, a lot more towards the run with Hill under center now. Hill's going to take a lot of those carries. I'm not sure the running backs are going to combine for more carries than they had been. Ingram is a flyer. The matchup here helps. Kamara, I do think Kamara takes a slight hit with Taysom Hill. It doesn't really matter for season long, like you're still starting him, but maybe he drops from RB3 to RB7 the rest of the way, because I do think the targets probably come down a tad, and Taysom Hill is going to steal some goal line stuff.
Yeah, I'd worry more about the goal line touchdowns personally. I think that there just aren't that many options for throwing the ball to beyond Kamara where they have to incorporate. I mean, we heard in the summer too about how Winston and Taysom Hill were trying to work with Alvin Kamara and building a connection because they know there's not a whole lot else to go with here.
Yes, for sure.
And speaking of which, nothing else on the Saints before we move on, right?
Nope.
Las Vegas at the New York Giants, Raiders by 3, over under at 46.5. Let's start with the Giants side because there are, as usual, plenty of injuries that we need to monitor. Saquon Barkley is up first. He's got the ankle sprain that we already needed to watch to see if it would be ready for him to return this week. And then we had the positive COVID test to start the week, a negative recheck. What's the status of Saquon Barkley on the COVID list before we even get to the ankle?
Yeah, he's still on the COVID list as of now. He's getting tested again today and then again tomorrow. He should be off it by Sunday, but if he had any chance of coming back from the ankle, missing practice on Wednesday and Thursday probably hurts those chances. The Giants also have a bye next week. So at this point, we'll see tomorrow on Friday, but at this point, I think it's going to be another Devontae Booker game, and Barkley's probably back after the bye week.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Barkley does make it back and he's active for the game, then he's probably a top 12 running back play this week because it has to mean that the Giants believe he's okay to play, to not give him another week with the bye on the other end. That said, don't head into the weekend expecting Barkley to be in your lineup.
Correct. And if Barkley is out, I think Devontae Booker is a pretty solid RB2. That's kind of how he's produced so far. And the Raiders are 28th in adjusted points allowed to running backs.
Mm-hmm. Wide receiver Sterling Shepard seems likely to miss this game with his quad injury. Kenny Golladay was still not back as of Wednesday. He probably wasn't back Thursday, right?
He actually returned to a limited practice on Thursday. So gives him a chance. He's been out so long, though. And again, with the bye coming up, I kind of don't expect him to play still. Dante Pettis is hurt now. So I think it's going to be Kadarius Toney, Darius Slayton, and John Ross as your top 3 Giants wide receivers on Sunday.
Top is used very loosely there. The whole situation, though, I mean, Kadarius Toney's got the thumb that he hurt Monday night. He was limited Wednesday, but doesn't seem like it should be an issue. He returned to that game. So he carries the high target ceiling that he had in that Dallas game a few weeks back. And it makes him an attractive PPR option this week.
Definitely. I mean, it feels a bit risky because like every game he's been heavily involved, he's gotten banged up in some way. And I don't know how big considering the ankle still is. But yeah, the upside is big with all these injuries, and the matchup's obviously fine.
And it's also worth noting that Darius Slayton and Evan Ingram seem like they're just not going to become a thing no matter who's in or out of the game. Jason Garrett just doesn't want to get them involved, it seems like. Actually, Darius Slayton got some chances. Evan Ingram is not getting any chance. You might be tall and fast, but you don't have a spot in this offense, pal, and we can throw a whole bunch of red zone targets at Kyle Rudolph.
Yes, Slayton had 9 targets 2 weeks ago. He was down to just 2 on Monday night. So he's going to be your second Giant receiver in, but not a comfortable play.
Yeah, I feel bad for you if in week 9 of fantasy you're like, I need a Giants receiver that's not Kadarius Toney. Who am I going to get here?
It's tough out there. Some people might.
It is. On the Raiders side, no injury issues of note, which is a good thing considering how the offense headed into the bye week. Josh Jacobs left the win over Philly with a chest injury, not on the injury report this week. Darren Waller, of course, missed that game with an ankle injury, not on the injury report this week. So we should be good to go with Jacobs and Waller for this game.
We should be. Waller's been fine. He had the blow up week 1. He's kind of been disappointing relative to expectations since then, but he's still second among tight ends in expected fantasy points per game on the season. He's 6th over the last 4 weeks. They're starting Darren Waller, obviously. Josh Jacobs, he's basically had 3 healthy games this season. He's averaged 15 carries and 3.7 targets in those 3 games. And the Giants are 24th in adjusted points allowed to running backs. You have the Raiders as slate favorites here, which always helps Jacobs. So I think he's in the running back 2 mix this week.
Yeah, I mean, if he gets a few more opportunities, he might become Chuba Hubbard. Henry Ruggs' departure, of course, leaves extra targets available, can only help Darren Waller's outlook. Not that he really needed help, can only help Hunter Renfrow, who also hasn't needed help for targets, but also probably helps Bryan Edwards a little bit. I mean, we're going to need to see it before believing in Bryan Edwards as a fantasy option. He's only averaging 4.4 targets per game this season, has not reached 4 receptions in a game since week 1, but the opportunity is there at least.
Yeah, I mean, Ruggs leaves behind 5.1 targets per game, so it's not a huge number. You're going to have Zay Jones be the Ruggs replacement. You know, he obviously can't do the same things Henry Ruggs could. But I'm not convinced Bryan Edwards' role is going to change a whole lot. So he's still, maybe you add him, you stash him, see what happens. I wouldn't use him this week. I do think Hunter Renfrow is in play, though, as a lower-end PPR option. He's been a top 35 PPR wide receiver in 4 of his last 5 games now, so he's been producing.
It's only because Hunter Renfrow used to steal Jared's lunch money that you're even talking about him like that, because he is that kind of option anyway, even regardless of Henry Ruggs' status. Derek Carr, by the way, takes his ceiling comes down a little bit with no Henry Ruggs. He did have more yards per attempt and a higher touchdown rate on balls thrown to Henry Ruggs than to anyone else, than to everybody else on the Raiders, but not a crazy boost either. It was only a little bit higher, both in touchdown rate and yards per attempt. Has been solid with everybody else. And Derek Carr's got the best remaining QB schedule according to our strength of schedule algorithm. So I think Derek Carr looks fine this week. I think he's a good player to have rostered for the rest of the season, because there are not many weeks where he doesn't look like at least a solid option.
Yeah, he's been good. The offense has looked better since Gruden left the picture. Not to get too much into narratives, but I am a little concerned just how this team responds. You had the Gruden thing, then the Ruggs thing. You know, it's a slight concern for me. The Giants pass D, at least by the numbers, actually has been decent too. They're 11th in Football Outsiders pass D, DVOA. They're 14th in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. I was kind of going back and forth. Carson Wentz versus Derek Carr as a spot starter this week. I would lean Wentz now. With the Ruggs situation, you know, you have a better matchup for Carson Wentz. So I'd go there if you happen to be deciding between those two guys.
Yeah, I think Derek Carr is a safer player. Carson Wentz between them is the guy who could implode, but I think that Wentz also has the higher ceiling. So I would probably lean that way as well if I'm making that decision right now. I wouldn't drop Derek Carr to go get Carson Wentz, though, especially with the upcoming schedule. This matchup with the Giants, you know, by adjusted fantasy points allowed, it's a slightly negative, but this basically neutral matchup is one of the worst remaining on Derek Carr's schedule.
Yeah, schedule is great.
Minnesota at Baltimore, Ravens by 5.5, over under 49.5. Last time we saw the Ravens, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase were torching them for 400 yards passing, 200 yards receiving, respectively. I'm not going to predict more of that, but my takeaway is to not be scared at all by this matchup for, you know, kind of the key Vikings pass catchers.
Yeah, I dug into the Ravens D a bit just because, just in my head, they have seemed so volatile this year. They've had some great games, some horrible games. Basically they limited Detroit, Denver, and then the Chargers. So they limited one good offense. They gave up big games to Derek Carr, Patrick Mahomes, Carson Wentz, and Joe Burrow. I think Cousins is closer to that group than the, Jared Goff, Teddy Bridgewater group. The other note here, we know the Ravens are a blitz-heavy defense. Cousins has the third best PFF passing grade when blitzed this season. So, we talked about that with Burrow a couple weeks ago, and he had a big game. It could be the same case for Cousins here. So I think he's an okay spot starter, and I definitely like Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen this week.
Yeah, and you might say, Kirk Cousins doesn't have Jamar Chase, but he's one of the few quarterbacks that has, his own Jamar Chase. I don't know if Justin Jefferson is at the same level. I might not be quite there, but certainly as close as just about any other receiver in the league. So a solid spot for Kirk Cousins. Neutral matchup, by the way, by our adjusted fantasy points allowed. So certainly not one that should turn you completely away. The kind of sneaky Viking here is Tyler Conklin. Baltimore has been the 6th most friendly tight end matchup by our adjusted points allowed. They've allowed the most PPR points per game to the position, and that has included over the past 2 weeks, not past 2 weeks, but past 2 games, because they're coming off the bye, touchdowns to Jared Cook, and of course, double touchdowns to CJ Uzama.
Right. Baltimore opened the season with Darren Waller and Travis Kelce. So I was like, oh, okay. Those guys just did what they're supposed to do, but they have struggled even since then against tight ends. Football Outsiders has them 22nd in tight end coverage. So Conklin, one of the better spot start options at tight end this week. I think this game has shootout potential too. So I kind of like using fringe pieces from this game.
I agree. And the matchup makes sense because Baltimore's weakest spot has been inside linebacker, and they're just kind of okay at safety. So it makes sense for them to have some issues with tight end coverage. On the Baltimore side, it's nice to have Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Marquise Brown back from bye. They're all fairly easy starters at their varying levels. Rashad Bateman, 6 targets in each of his first 2 games is nice. I don't think it quite gets him to the point where he's a comfy starter in most cases, though, or even all that attractive.
Yeah, not comfortable. I do think he's in play this week. We have to keep an eye on Sammy Watkins, who sounds like he was back at practice today. I haven't seen his participation level yet. He was out on Wednesday, back on the field Thursday. If he plays, that'd have me shying away from Bateman a bit, just not knowing how Watkins and Bateman are going to, come out playing time wise. But if Watkins is out, I think 6 targets in both of Bateman's first 2 NFL games after missing that much time is pretty encouraging. His route rates were in like the mid 60s in both of those games. I think coming out of the bye, he might be ready to, bump that up, closer to a full-time player. So I kind of like Bateman as a wide receiver 3 if Watkins is out. If Watkins is back, I would just try to avoid the Ravens wide receivers outside of Marquise Brown.
I'll say he's an attractive wide receiver 4 with maybe Jamal Agnew upside.
I'll take it.
And then that backfield, Latavius Murray was still not practicing Wednesday despite coming off the bye. Have you seen what he did Thursday, if anything?
Yeah, he didn't practice Thursday either. And I know Dr. Chow said when he suffered the injury that he thought it was a high ankle sprain. And it's only been, I think, like 2.5 weeks now since the injury. So I don't think he's going to play. I still don't want to use any of these Ravens running backs. It's a 3-way committee. Devontae Freeman, Le'Veon Bell, and Tyson Williams were all, pretty equal as far as snaps go last time out. If you have to pick one, it's Devontae Freeman. But again, better off avoiding it.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to pick one, it's basically a blind dart throw because that's what it was before. It could be something different coming out of the bye. We're all guessing it. The way to play it is to take none of them if possible. I would play Devin Singletary over any of these guys.
Me too.
Anything else from that game?
Nope.
Cleveland at Cincinnati, Bengals by 2.5, over under 47. Odell Beckham has made himself, well, maybe not himself. Maybe his dad made him the big story here this week. Been excused from practice Wednesday and Thursday. Maybe he'll be excused from the team soon. It certainly seems like we shouldn't count on him playing, although there's something out there about him still planning to play. We'll see. It's a situation to monitor because it might be financially unreasonable for Cleveland to dump him this week. It's at least easier not to be like waiting breathlessly for this story to resolve in fantasy terms because he's only had 2 even usable games all year for fantasy.
Yes, I hope he ends up somewhere else just to see if it can kind of get him going. But he's off the radar now. I don't think he's going to play this week. Donovan Peoples-Jones looks like he's ready to return from the groin injury. If Beckham's out of the picture, it's going to be Jarvis Landry, DPJ, and Rashard Higgins as the top 3 wide receivers for Cleveland the rest of the way. DPJ, an intriguing stash. I wouldn't use him this week. Wouldn't use Higgins this week. Jarvis Landry, though, he has a 26% target share across his 3 healthy games this season. And, those came with Odell Beckham. So he should be a good target bet the rest of the way. Cincinnati 24th in adjusted points allowed to wide receiver. So I think Landry is a pretty solid wide receiver 3 play this week, maybe even, creeping into wide receiver 2 territory.
Yeah, Landry also saw 26% target share last year after Odell Beckham went down, including the 2 playoff games. So that's a good level for him to be at. He's always been a guy who needed the volume. We'll see how much they throw, but this seems like a matchup that could drive some passing volume with the way Cincinnati's been scoring lately. So yeah, I agree. I like Jarvis Landry in that range. I would certainly play him over, Rashad Bateman if you're looking for guys in that level. I would play Jarvis Landry over Emmanuel Sanders as well.
That one's closer. I'd go Landry in PPR for sure. Kind of a toss-up in none.
On the Cincinnati side, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase are obvious. Joe Burrow comfortably inside the top 12, bordering on obvious among quarterbacks at this point. 3 straight games of 3 touchdown passes, threw 6 touchdown passes last year in the 2 meetings with Cleveland. High passing volume in those 2 games, 108 attempts in just those 2 games. But they've been leaning a bit more pass this year. He, of course, has the upgrade in Jamar Chase. So feeling pretty good about starting Joe Burrow this week.
Yeah, Cincinnati 10th in situation neutral pass rate over the last 4 weeks now. So we had talked about it. They've kind of completed the transformation now, back to being a pass leaning offense. The Browns look like a pass funnel defense. Football Outsiders has them 3rd against the run, but 25th against the pass. So I do expect a pass leaning, maybe pass heavy game plan from Cincinnati here. So I like Burrow, like Chase. T. Higgins has the exact same amount of targets as Jamar Chase over the last 4 weeks. He's been a bit unlucky, I think. So I think Higgins is an easy start. Tyler Boyd had 2 big games against Cleveland last year. 7 catches, 72 yards and a touchdown. 11 catches, 101 yards and a touchdown. That obviously came without T. Higgins. Boyd isn't playing as big a role this year. But I do think he's in play this week. Cleveland has allowed the 10th most fantasy points to slot wide receivers this season, so they've struggled against that position. So I think Boyd's a decent play this week, coming off one of his better games of the season.
He's caught 5+ balls in 5 straight meetings with Cleveland. Obviously, there have been changes to the Cincinnati offense in that time frame that makes him lower on the totem pole. But you mentioned it's a good matchup. It can only help the matchup for him if Cleveland's top corner Denzel Ward returns to play outside. So we'll keep an eye on that situation. And I agree on T. Higgins. He's 40th among wideouts in PPR points per game, tied for 25th in that group in targets at this point, though. So he is, I think he's a buy at this point. I think he's a pretty easy start this week, and I'm interested to see where it goes with him.
Agreed.
Anything else from that game?
Nope.
Denver at Dallas, Cowboys by 10, up 1.5, because we're all expecting Dak Prescott to return. Over under a 49.5 on the Denver side. First, though, Noah Fant out, of course, on the COVID list. That makes Albert Okwuegbunam a solid starter. The talent upside is there. It's kind of tough to know what the numbers will be because we haven't seen him as the lead tight end at any point in his, brief NFL career to this point. But Broncos have the 4th most tight end receptions this year. They had the 4th most tight end receptions last year, and their tight ends collectively had 27% of the targets last week in Jerry Jeudy's return game.
Right. Noah Fant averaged 8 targets per game without Albert O this season. So that's kind of the upside for Albert. I'm not saying he's getting 8 targets, but he's an exciting pass catching tight end. Big time size, speed, plus athlete. Dallas is actually 32nd in Football Outsiders tight end coverage rankings, and they're 23rd in adjusted points allowed to tight end. So excited to use Albert O in DFS this week, and I do think he is a spot start option in season long, assuming Fant is out. Fant, it sounds like he does have a chance to be cleared in time for Sunday, but it seems unlikely at this point.
Yeah, I've picked up Alberto in a couple of places to play him in season long. So at this point, I'm kind of hoping that Noah Fant is out this week. Although
I'm starting
him in Fant, so it's a win-win.
Yeah, I'm starting him in main event. I have Hawkinson on bye, so I picked up Alberto. He's my guy this week.
Nice. Jerry Jeudy tied for the team lead with 4 targets last week, caught all 4 of them, so it's nice. 3rd among wide receivers in snaps, 72% share for that game. Tim Patrick led the group. 3 catches or fewer in 3 straight games for Tim Patrick, though. I would think that we get more Jerry Jeudy this week, but we'll see to confirm that.
Yeah, I would expect that too. Denver only threw the ball 26 times last week in that, sloppy game against Washington. The pass volume should be up quite a bit this week, as big underdogs in Dallas. Hopefully, Jeudy looked good to me last week. He didn't suffer a setback. I think the playing time is going to be up. I think Jeudy and Courtland Sutton are fine plays this week again in what should be a high-scoring game where Denver's going to have to throw it quite a bit.
And there's been no change to the split backfield. It's still split. It's still guess who's going to get a few more targets and guess who's going to get touchdown opportunities.
Yeah, I think both guys are RB3s.
Mm-hmm. On the Dallas side, Dak Prescott back to a full practice Thursday, so he should be good to go. Obviously, keep an eye to confirm that. Michael Gallup's practicing, but not yet back on the active roster. Mike McCarthy said Thursday morning that they want to see a full practice week from Michael Gallup and then evaluate things to see if he's ready for that game. So we'll see about Michael Gallup. CeeDee Lamb we'll also see about because he sprained an ankle in Wednesday's practice.
Can we ever get this offense fully healthy? I don't think it's been fully healthy since Lamb arrived, has it? Between the wide receivers and the O-line and Dak. And Lamb officially did not practice on Thursday. There was some video of him doing some resistance band stuff with trainers. And one of the beat writers said they still expect him to play, but we'll have to check back on him on Friday. I think that, that's when Gallup would become an option this week if CeeDee Lamb's out and Gallup is in. Otherwise, I wouldn't use Gallup this week. We'll see too what happens to Dalton Schultz's volume when all 3 of these wide receivers are healthy. I do think it's going to take a hit. I don't think it's going to knock him out of tight end 1 territory because the offense is so good. He's been so good. But I do think it's probably going to impact Dalton Schultz's volume.
With how much they like to run the ball, I can certainly see that happen. And 6 of 7 games have landed him in the 6 to 8 target range this year. So, I think if he loses some, we're talking about a couple of targets a game, maybe. There might be just a few games mixed in where he's down, but certainly somebody who's probably still going to be in the top 12 mix for us. And certainly somebody I'm using this week, even though he's coming off just a 2-catch game against Minnesota, still got 7 targets in that game. So I was still seeing the usage, and unfortunately it was from Cooper Rush.
Exactly.
Anything else from that game?
Nope.
Houston at Miami, Dolphins by 6.5, over under 45.5. Even against Miami, I think we can skip all but Brandon Cooks on the Houston side. We will see, though, whether Tyrod Taylor's return makes any difference for anyone's outlook on this team.
I think the offense will be better, and I think it just helps Brandon Cooks. Now, I think Tyrod in 2 quarterback superflex leagues could be an option, with the rushing ability. Passing volume is going to be up because Houston's playing from behind all the time. But, yeah, it's just Brandon Cooks. I think Tyrod helps the Dolphins outlook, too, though, just the chance this game stays closer and kind of, keeps Miami playing.
We'll see. The backfield, if you're wondering what was going to happen after Mark Ingram left, the answer is they're going to just give the ball to whoever shows up. Touches were spread among 4 running backs still in that game after Mark Ingram left. Rex Burkhead sitting up out of the coffin, Undertaker style, jumping back into the mix. Don't play a Texans running back if you can help it.
Yeah, David Johnson and Phillip Lindsay, the 2 guys we thought would kind of be the leaders. They finished 3rd and 4th in snaps. It was Rex Burkhead first and Scotty Phillips second. So Houston's just messing with us at this point.
Scotty Phillips. I'm still not convinced that's a real player. On the Miami side, it's a week to just play whatever you want. If you're wondering about a Miami player, go ahead and play him because he has a chance to do some stuff. Devontae Parker reemerged last week after 3 games down for injury. Season highs in targets, catches, and yards, but he's been good when healthy. He's wide receiver 37 in PPR points per game, but only has 1 touchdown. There's only 2 other guys ahead of him in those rankings that just have 1 touchdown like he does.
Yeah, Parker has 7 targets in all 5 of his games. He's 16th among wide receivers in targets per game. He's 25th in our expected fantasy points per game. So good matchup against Houston here. Houston 14th in adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. They have allowed the 4th most fantasy points to outside wide receivers, though, which is obviously where Parker plays. And, with the volume, I think he's like a borderline wide receiver 2 this week, and definitely someone I'll be considering in DFS.
Yeah. And I think anybody else that you're considering on the Miami offense is in play.
Yeah. Parker's return does hurt Waddle and Gesicki's target volume, but in this matchup, it doesn't matter. I think they're both nice starters.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Myles Gaskin, or should we move on to the next game?
No, he's a good play. I mean, again, don't expect 20 carries, but 12 to 15 carries and a handful of targets against the Texans. He's a nice play.
Mm-hmm. LA Chargers at the Philadelphia Eagles. Chargers by 1 in this one, down 1 from where it opened, over under 50 points. Justin Herbert started out the season excellent. Past couple times he took the field, 54% completion rate combined between those outings against Baltimore and then the Patriots. 5.65 yards per pass attempt over those 2 games, just 3 touchdowns versus 3 interceptions in those contests.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a concern. It's Baltimore, who again has been up and down, but I think there's still talent there. It's a good scheme. And then Bill Belichick, who has limited plenty of quarterbacks throughout his career. Philly's been good against the pass. Football Outsiders has them 12th in pass D. They're 3rd in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks, but it's not a team I'm running away from matchup wise. Herbert does have that right hand injury. He was limited Wednesday, but he was a full go on Thursday. So that seems like a minor concern, probably a non-concern. We'll see how he's listed on the final injury report. He's lower than usual in our rankings, but I think if Herbert's been your starter all season, I would stick with him this week. I wouldn't be, playing Carson Wentz or Kirk Cousins over him.
Yeah, I wouldn't go nuts. I wouldn't go reaching for a quarterback to play over him. I would play Joe Burrow or Taysom Hill over him, who are, realistic guys that could be on the same roster. Derek Carr is kind of a either way. I think Derek Carr probably has a higher floor. I would go for Justin Herbert ceiling. And I mean, if I had the decision, I would have to tell myself ultimately, I really have no idea. And it's going to depend on who happens to throw 3 touchdowns in their game.
Yeah, Burrow and Hill for me, that'd kind of be it for the guys I'd use over Herbert this week.
And I'm not changing my outlook for Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, or Mike Williams, despite last week's disappointment.
No, this Eagles defense, they keep everything in front of them. And if you look at the numbers, They are 32nd in completion rate allowed to quarterbacks this season. They're 10th in yards per catch allowed. So they're just allowing a lot of short catches. That to me says Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen are going to have big games here. Michael Williams is going to be fine too because he's done more of the shorter stuff this season. But to me, this sets up as a good defensive matchup for guys like Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler.
Yeah, especially with the crap that the Eagles are rolling out at linebacker. It's a positive matchup for Jared Cook, but his role is just limited to the point where it could be a good matchup and he could just see 5 targets and catch 3 of them and just not do a whole lot. Or he could score a touchdown and you'd be in luck.
Yeah, kind of in the Hunter Henry touchdown or bust mold. I was wondering if Donald Parham's role would climb coming out of the bye. It actually went in the opposite direction. Cook kind of separated himself as far as pass routes go versus Parham. So that makes him a safer bet if you need to use him.
Yeah, I like that at least. I would play Jared Cook over Hunter Henry if I were making that decision, but I would play Tyler Conklin and Albert O over Jared Cook.
Yeah, I think I would too.
On the Philly side, it's same as usual. I mean, Jalen Hurts obviously let you down fantasy-wise last week, but there's not really a takeaway from it. I mean, there's not going to be another game this year where he throws 14 passes, leaves at the beginning of the fourth quarter because they're winning by so much, and his team runs the ball in 74% of offensive plays. It's just, we're not going to get that game flow again. So don't worry about it too much. I guess if there's anything to take away, just know that he's not actually going to give you all the points every week.
Right. And this passing matchup is tough. The Chargers, 4th in Football Outsiders pass D, 2nd in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks, but the Chargers are 32nd in Football Outsiders run defense ranking. So, for a guy like Hurts, that might actually help his fantasy outlook if the Eagles go run heavier. And, he's a big part of that. So yeah, I'm definitely starting Hurts without hesitation this week.
What would really help his fantasy outlook, though, is if the other team actually scores first in this game and then sets up some garbage time in the second half, which is where he shines.
I think you might get that this week.
If he keeps going like he has for most of the season by scoring in garbage time, we'll have to call him Oscar for the second half. For the Eagles backfield, obviously we were all hoping for Kenneth Gainwell, maybe not hoping, but expecting Kenneth Gainwell to be the top touch getter. The opposite direction. I mean, I can understand it being a committee, but it wasn't even a committee. It was Boston Scott leading things. Then it was some Jordan Howard, and Kenneth Gainwell basically disappeared until the team had pulled starters in the fourth quarter. Kenneth Gainwell got 12 of his 13 carries in the fourth quarter after Gardner Minshew entered that game at halftime. It was 9 carries for Boston Scott to 4 for Howard and 1 for Gainwell.
Yeah, I think Gainwell's role just did not change with Miles Sanders out. He is still like the pass catching back, the come from behind back, and Philly played this entire game with the lead. So that just meant, no Kenneth Gainwell. That could definitely change this week. Philly could be playing from behind for most of this game. And the matchup's good for the entire backfield. So we talked about the Chargers defense plenty. Dead last in Football Outsiders run D, 23rd in adjusted points allowed to running backs, and teams have been choosing to go run heavy against the Chargers. Boston Scott for me is the top play in this backfield still, though. I think he's the best carry bet. Gainwell has some appeal in PPR leagues, but again, you see the floor last week if the Eagles find themselves playing from ahead again.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's a positive rushing matchup. So even if they do fall behind, they're still going to want to run the ball. And they showed us in the game that Miles Sanders left. It wasn't just a plan heading into last week. When Miles Sanders went down, Boston Scott came in and split things. So they're not going to make Kenneth Gainwell the lead back, regardless of what's going on. Maybe he has a J.D. McKissick game, but this is just a reminder of why we don't want to overrate the whole handcuff angle, because we're not going to know. A lot of times we're just going to have to wait and see what happens when the starter goes down. And if, most of these situations are just unclear heading in.
Yeah. And Gainwell profiled as a change of pace back coming into the league. He's undersized. He was, never a workhorse in college, did a lot in the pass game. That's just the kind of back he is. So I'm a little mad at myself for, I think, overrating Kenneth Gainwell last week.
Mm-hmm. There are plenty of people mad about that one. I at least didn't put a whole lot of stock or money into it, so I'm not too upset. Dallas Goedert, by the way, had a nice week, even though they didn't throw the ball a whole lot. He drew half of Jalen Hurts' 14 pass attempts in that one, so you have to like his usage going forward.
Yeah, he's a buy if you can still get him, because the production has not been huge since the Ertz trade, but the usage as far as, playing time and route rate, all that has been all you could ask for since Ertz has been dealt to Arizona. And And this could be the breakout week for Goddard, because the Chargers are top 9 against all 3 wide receiver spots and running backs in Football Outsiders coverage DVOA. They're 30th against tight end. So that's clearly the weak spot of this pass defense. I think Goddard should be featured in this passing game. So, try to buy him now in season long and play Goddard in DFS this week.
One thing that was interesting last week was Dallas Goedert lined up almost exclusively in line, like that traditional tight end spot, as opposed to out in the slot, which is where he spent more than half of his snaps in previous games. Now, that might have just been a function of the way that game went, mostly running, playing from ahead the whole time. And that's just where he was lined up so that he could either run block or run out for a pass. One game doesn't mean it's changed. I'll be curious to see if this coming week is more like all of the previous games, or if it's shifting toward what it was last week. Something to watch, not something to change the expectation for on him now. And I mean, he's going to be running a lot of routes either way and getting targets either way. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. He has to play more traditional tight end with Ertz gone. But again, like you said, as long as he's running pass routes, I'm not too concerned about where he's running them from.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, if he gets more targets from that inline spot than he does from the slot, then I would rather have him doing that. Yep. Devontae Smith, we kind of have to mention him, but I don't know if I have anything different to say about him every week. I mean, he's a wide receiver 4. Maybe it's going to be good sometimes. There have been 3 games that I would say are the kind of games you don't want to miss in your lineup, but he's also had 4 games that are games you would really like to avoid. So, I mean, at best, it's like he might help you. He might really hurt you.
Yeah, and I think this is more likely to be a hurt you week. The Chargers are first in adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. Again, the Chargers are really good against wide receivers, not good against tight ends, and not good against the running game.
So yeah, not a special week for Devontae Smith, I think. I just had a question in email before this. Somebody wondering if they should play Ty Johnson or Devontae Smith in a PPR league. Ty Johnson's a safer bet. It's certainly a higher ceiling on Devontae Smith, but Ty Johnson's probably a safer bet for opportunities.
I had notes on Johnson that we didn't get to, but I mean, he's seen 7 and 6 targets the past 2 games, with Mike White for most of that. He's played just 32 and 34% of the snaps, though ran a route on like less than 30% of the pass play. So he's very flimsy. Mm-hmm. I know the targets have been there so far, but I'd probably have to go with Devontae Smith there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really one of those where I don't have strong conviction either way, and I don't think that either one is a slam dunk. Arizona at San Francisco, the Cardinals by 1, down 1.5. Well, that'll probably change heading into the weekend, depending on Kyler Murray's status, because we're watching his ankle to see if he's going to be able to play. He didn't practice Thursday, did he?
Didn't practice Thursday. Cliff Kingsbury has said that Kyler can play without practicing, but I don't think he's a lock to play. Jay Glazer reported last Sunday that this is a 1 to 3 week ankle injury. So if he does play, he's not going to be 100%. He's not going to have the rushing ability, which honestly, he hasn't been running a whole lot this year anyways. But it's still not good to have your, mobile quarterback out there with a gimpy ankle. So we'll see. Beyond that, you have DeAndre Hopkins with the hamstring. He hasn't practiced yet this week. And AJ Green is on the COVID list as of now. So lots of moving parts in this Cardinals offense.
And considering that when they matched up with San Francisco earlier this year, we had a healthy Kyler Murray and just 27 total points in that game. It's going to be a week to seriously consider playing another quarterback over Kyler Murray, even if he's active for that game, depending on who you have. It stinks that we don't have the option of playing Carson Wentz. Well, I mean, you do have that option if you're just don't want to wait and see on Kyler Murray. But, that's one of the things I hate about Thursday Night Football. But it could be, I'm probably playing Taysom Hill over him. It might be tough for me to play Kyler over Kirk Cousins. Again, we'll watch the ankle and see where we're at over the weekend, but I think that's the level where you really have to think about it.
Yeah, in most cases, unless it's Wentz versus Kyler, you can obviously wait. And if Wentz was my backup, that'd be a tough call. It would depend like who else is available on the waiver wire in case Kyler ends up not playing. Again, I don't think it's a lock he plays in this game. But I'm with you. I would probably at this point lean towards guys like Burrow and Taysom Hill at least over Kyler. I'm not sure I'd go down to like the Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins tier, but we'll see what we hear over the next few days here.
Yeah, I'll try to gauge that Saturday and Sunday. This isn't a game that I think is going to have a whole lot of points though, so I'm not even sure we're going to miss out on ceiling here, but we'll see. Elsewhere on the Arizona offense, you mentioned some other issues to watch. We did get, on the positive side, the Chase Edmonds touchdown last week that you called for.
Yeah, it was like a wildcat play too, right? Yeah, I was pumped when that came. Yeah, I mean, same deal with Edmonds. His usage remains strong. You can't count on him for touchdowns because Connor's getting those carries, but Edmonds is gonna find the end zone, just getting as many touches as he is. He did re-injure his shoulder in that Thursday night game. He ended up coming back in. He was limited in practice on Wednesday. He's gonna play, but just something to keep an eye on.
I'm just happy to find out that he knows where the end zone is.
Me too.
On the 49ers side, Deebo Samuel did not practice Wednesday with a calf issue. Doesn't seem like it's overly serious, but we'll have to watch him. Elijah Mitchell did not practice Wednesday with a rib issue. Sounds like that's something we're going to have to watch. I believe Matt Barrows, too, said that Trey Sermon would be the starter if Elijah Mitchell can't go for this game.
Yeah, I'm not gonna believe that. I'm gonna wait to see it. The Niners beaters have been wrong about that before. Mitchell and Deebo were both limited on Thursday, so I do think they're both gonna play. Deebo has obviously been awesome. You're starting him, and Eli Mitchell's really been awesome too when he's been healthy. Clear lead ball carrier for San Francisco. Not doing hardly anything in the passing game, which hurts. But any back in this Shanahan running scheme, getting 15 plus touches is definitely a fantasy starter.
Yeah, he's Damian Harris. Same thing, really. And George Kittle looks like he should be back this week.
Yeah, he's back at practice. I think you're starting him if he's back. Brandon Ayuk coming off his best usage of the season, 88% of the snaps, 25% target share. So maybe snag him if he was dropped in your league, see what happens. But I mean, Kittle coming back kind of, to me, dampens any enthusiasm for Ayuk just because he's kind of back to where we thought he'd be preseason as, maybe the third option in this run heavy offense.
Yeah, if you have somebody that you were going to drop for Adrian Peterson or whatever, somebody that you didn't win in waivers this week that's just expendable, I think it's worth dropping them for Brandon Ayuk just to see what happens because, we didn't even get a full look at the offense last year, so we don't really know what it looks like with a healthy Deebo, with a well-performing Ayuk, and with the healthy George Kittle. So I think there's at least talent worth taking a shot on if you have a roster spot to play with. And Kyle Shanahan said that they've been waiting for the bounce back from Brandon Ayuk. So it's not like they don't believe in him. They just don't like what they've seen from him so far this year. So definitely an interesting guy still.
Yep.
Anything else from that game?
No.
Green Bay at Kansas City, Chiefs by 7.5. That's of course up 5 from where it was at the open because of a very key guy missing. Over under 48.5, down 7. I mean, nothing besides Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones for me on the Packers side with Aaron Rodgers on the COVID list.
I think A.J. Dillon is in play because I think Green Bay is going to go basically as run heavy as they can. I mean, until they get down multiple scores, and they might not if Kansas City's offense keeps struggling. So, I mean, Dillon had, 16 carries last week, with no Devontae Adams. He could, I think, get close to that number this week, and the matchup is obviously good against Kansas City. So I think he's like an RB3. Yeah, Adams, I mean, we downgrade him to like low-end wide receiver 1 status with the quarterback change. Adams played 8 games that Rodgers missed all or most of back in 2017. That was with Brett Hundley at quarterback. He scored as the PPR wide receiver 12 over those 8 games. So he was not elite, but he was still a low-end wide receiver 1. So you're starting Devontae Adams.
Yeah, we'll certainly take that with a quarterback who has never been very good in Brett Hundley. I probably sound a little bougie acting like I don't have to consider whether to start A.J. Dillon. I'm up here with the true running backs. I don't care about the scraps.
You're a known Dillon hater, so no surprise there.
That's for sure. I don't hate him anymore, though, because everybody got excited about him and pushed him too far up, and then everybody started hating him again early in the year when he didn't do anything. So now I'm back on his side.
He's good, man.
On his side. I never started on his side. Now I'm on his side.
He's good. I mean, I don't know if something ever happened to Aaron Jones, Dillon would be a fantasy monster.
He's fun to watch at least because I like when he was backing for the first down through Arizona's defense on Thursday night. That was fun.
He's a monster.
On the KC side, maybe we get some more rushing volume from this one against the number 30 defense in rushing DVOA from Kansas City. Packers are also, though, mid-pack in pass defense. So, I mean, Kansas City is going to do what it wants to do. We'll see whether it succeeds in doing what it wants to do this week.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, to me, last week was the most worrisome performance yet out of Kansas. I even thought they looked better against Tennessee. They just had more turnovers against Tennessee. They didn't even look good minus the turnovers against the Giants to me. Yeah, you're still starting Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. You're still starting Darrell Williams. I know the Derek Gore stuff was kind of frustrating. Even watching the game, it seemed like he played more than he actually did, but he only played 20% of the snaps. Darrell Williams played 64% of the snaps. Darrell Williams ran a route on 67% of the pass plays. Darrell Williams got 13 carries and 6 targets. Like, you give me that volume on this offense, which is still a top 5 offense. Like, I still think it's a top 5 offense. Williams for me is a pretty easy fantasy starter this week.
I think it seemed like more because it almost all came at once. There was one drive where Derek Gore just took over. He got 7 of his 11 carries on that drive, finished it off with the touchdown. And then shortly thereafter, everybody's like, God, is this game still going? We just kind of forgot about the rest of it. But Darrell Williams caught a bunch of passes. I agree. I came out of the game like, do I need to worry about Derek Gore? And then look at the numbers afterward. And it's like, nah, I don't really need to.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe his role grows, but at minimum, Darrell Williams is locked in as the pass catching back here, which is kind of the most important thing in Kansas City. That plus the goal line stuff.
Right, Derek Gore is considerable down at Devin Singletary level, but certainly not somebody that I'm strongly considering using this week. And I'm not worried about Darrell Williams right now. We'll see. Maybe a couple of days from now, or 3-4 days from now, I'll be like, oh, you were talking like an idiot.
It's always possible.
Anything else in that game?
Josh Gordon, season high route rate last week, 42%, kind of out of nowhere. Did nothing. I'm obviously not starting him. Maybe you stash him. Yeah, I'd still rather stash Brandon Ayuk than Josh Gordon, but at least on my radar after that increase in playing time last week.
I'd rather stash Bryan Edwards than Josh Gordon. The only reason we're even talking about him is because he used to be Josh Gordon.
Yeah, I'll never talk bad about Bryan Edwards, so that's fine with me.
There you go. Tennessee at the Rams on Sunday night. Rams by 7.5, up 1 point from where it opened, and over under a 53.5. The post Derrick Henry backfield is obviously the biggest story for this game. Adrian Peterson in my main event league, Jared, went for $536 on waivers. $285 was the next highest bid. So, I mean, people throwing as much as they could basically at him, and I expected that. I was definitely not in on the bidding. I think this is going to be another case where we're like, okay, Adrian Peterson is the Derrick Henry replacement, and then ultimately realize there's no such thing as a Derrick Henry replacement.
No, I mean, if you're expecting Peterson to even get 75% of Henry's volume, you're going to be disappointed. I want to believe that the Titans are going to become this like pass heavy offense, and Jeremy McNichols is going to be like the main guy as the pass catching back and see like 10 to 12 carries per game. But man, I could just see like Peterson, again, not getting anything close to Derrick Henry level workload, but getting 15 or so carries per game. And McNichols, I do think he'll play a bigger role, and he's going to remain the pass catching back. He's going to have value. We'll see. I think this is a big opportunity for McNichols because I don't think Peterson's going to play a big role in his first game after not playing or practicing all off season. We signed on Monday, so I think this is a chance for McNichols to kind of capitalize on the opportunity.
People like to say, look at the actions of the Titans this week. They ran out and signed Adrian Peterson right away after Derrick Henry went down. They also signed Deontay Foreman on the exact same day. Adrian Peterson was on the open market before that. He's on the practice squad right now. So they're not even, I don't believe he's protected there. But they're not like, oh my God, we need Adrian Peterson. They signed both of those guys on the same day. Deontay Foreman has played more recently, at least in practice in the NFL. And Dontrell Hilliard is also on the practice squad, was on the active roster last week. I don't think that we're going to get a lead runner here unless it is Jeremy McNichols. I think it's going to be a committee approach. And the only way that I'm getting some of this post Derrick Henry backfield is if I can get a cheap piece. I got Dontrell Hilliard for $7 in the same waiver run that saw Adrian Peterson go for $536. Now, maybe Hilliard does absolutely nothing. I'm not losing anything on that. I dropped Tariq Cohen to get him. Maybe he is involved because he's younger and has a good athletic profile. And, anybody in Tennessee who plays running back is capable of, being a hot hand at some point.
Yeah. I mean, McNichols is still the guy that intrigues me the most. And I do think he might be the best bet in PPR the rest of the way. The answer might also just be no one in this backfield. And the answer might be Ryan Tannehill, who's going to have to do more. He's going to have to throw it more. Julio Jones is back at practice. Like if he can just get and stay healthy, like he could still be a thing the rest of the way. And AJ Brown is, back to being an easy top 10 wide receiver the rest of the way. He's going to, he's going to probably be, 8 to 12 targets per game going forward with the increase in pass volume for the Titans here.
Yeah, McNichols would definitely be my top bet in that backfield as well. He's the only one that I'm considering starting this week unless I'm in really bad shape. Plus, we have to wait and see who actually gets elevated to join McNichols on the active roster because it's only him at running back on the current active roster.
Yep, that's right.
On the Rams side, you're playing everyone as usual. Robert Woods has a foot injury that we're going to need to watch. Do you know if he practiced Thursday?
Have not seen their practice report yet. Stafford was limited with a back issue too. It didn't seem like anything serious, but we'll have to keep an eye on those two guys. Yeah, they're both easy starters if they're active. Van Jefferson's a guy getting like a ton of hype in the fantasy community this week. I'm not really sure why. Like, I don't know if people are excited about Deshaun Jackson's departure. Deshaun Jackson wasn't hardly playing at all anyways. He wasn't seeing many targets. I don't think his departure does anything for Van Jefferson. Van Jefferson is 60th among wide receivers in expected fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks. Like he's okay if you need him as a bye week option, but I don't think he's going to become like this every week fantasy starter. I think he's more like a handcuff. You know, if Woods or Kupp misses time, then Jefferson becomes a weekly fantasy starter. But right now, I think he's just kind of like a flyer.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing that really makes him make sense as kind of a hot name right now. And Robert Woods has the foot injury. If Woods is out, then that certainly helps Van Jefferson. But I agree, it's basically McCole Hardman for them. If Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp's out, Van Jefferson looks attractive. Otherwise, you know, could he score for you in any given week? Sure. Could he also catch 2 balls for, 23 yards? Yes.
Yep, exactly.
Anything else from that game?
I'm glad Tyler Higbee's off the main DFS slate, so I can stop chasing him. Man, he's kind of like breaking my brain, just being on the field so much for such a good passing game, but he's just not. It's not turning into fantasy points.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but at least he's not totally letting you down and offering nothing.
Yep.
Before we get to the last game, we got a quick question from YouTube for a Thursday night start. Jacoby Myers versus Jamison Crowder. Who you got?
I'd go Myers. It's close though. I kind of think the Mike White bubble is going to burst tonight, and the Jets offense is just going to struggle.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly a toss-up. I would probably go Jamison Crowder because I just believe in him a little bit more as a player. But we could get one team throwing 28 times and one team throwing 45 times, and that will be the answer. And we can't really know that heading in.
Yeah, so we were no help there to James.
Yeah, you're welcome, James, but sorry. On to Chicago and Pittsburgh on Monday night to close that out. Steelers by 6.5, over under 40. I love the game from Justin Fields last week, even though it happened on my bench behind Teddy Bridgewater and Daniel Jones in a 2-quarterback league. That said, I absolutely need to see it again before I'm believing in it and considering using Justin Fields in any real capacity this week. Certainly not taking that chance against TJ Watt.
Yeah, Matt Nagy's back this week too, which evidently is bad news for Justin. We should have maybe put some stock into that. Nagy out of the way. Maybe this is Fields' breakout game, but he's back this week, so we'll see. But yeah, the Pittsburgh. We saw what a good pass rush could do to Fields in that Tampa game, and Pittsburgh's is just as good, if not better. So on the road in prime time, I would want to see it from Fields one more week too before using him.
You think Matt Nagy, I almost called him Adam Gase. You think Matt Nagy has a Justin Fields voodoo doll like hidden away? He just like bends the leg if Justin Fields is about to get away from the defense?
That sounds like something Matt Nagy would do.
David Montgomery designated to return from IR this week, but we're going to have to wait and see whether he's actually ready to return to game action.
Yeah, Nagy, speaking of Nagy, he did say today that Montgomery's still the lead back when he's healthy. And one of the beat writers said that he expects Montgomery to play on Monday, but be like limited, like play a little, I think was how he termed it. Hopefully that's not the case. Like just the Bears have a bye next week. So hopefully they let Montgomery get healthy, bring him back in week 11. Khalil Herbert, horrible matchup against Pittsburgh, but he'd still be a low end fantasy starter because the volume, if Montgomery's out, if Montgomery's back, the backfield would kind of be one I just want to stay away from.
I wish that beat writers would do less of, I think this guy is going to do this. And, just more of like if a coach says something, or even if a player says something, say, This is what the guy said. And otherwise be like, I don't know, I'm guessing just like you guys are.
It's tough. Like I want the insight from these guys who are around this team every day. And honestly, some of them are a lot better than others. And I should, start making a list of, the beat writers we can kind of trust and the ones we can't. I don't know. I don't mind it as much, but you do have to be careful, what you buy into and what you kind of shove aside.
Yeah, that's for sure. Just make sure that as you consume it, you know that it's a writer's opinion and not a report from the team.
Yep.
The RBs are really all I'm looking at on the Chicago side, waiting to see what happens with David Montgomery, because there's just nothing else to really trust here. Cole Kmet did get 6 targets for the second straight game last week, but he also caught 3 of them for 24 yards. His next 50-yard game will be his first of the season.
Yeah, he's actually 13th among tight ends in expected fantasy points over the last 4 weeks now. He's, obviously underperformed that usage because everything in Chicago is, underperforming the usage. Kmet, emergency only option. I'm starting Conklin over him. I'm starting Jared Cook over him. I'm starting the tight end on the other side of this game over Kmet pretty easily.
And he's only that high because we can't reasonably expect fantasy points from most tight ends.
Exactly.
On the Pittsburgh side, Chicago has been a neutral matchup for quarterback and wide receiver scoring. So I think Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool are certainly in view at their respective levels, with Deontay Johnson first. Negative for running back scoring, which I don't care about, for Najee Harris. Terrible for tight end scoring. It would be nice for Pat Freiermuth to be in a better spot. I still will take him in his 2 straight 7-target games, though, over guys like Cole Kmet.
Definitely over Cole Kmet. I think he's right in the mix with the Conklins and the Cooks and these other guys we've talked about. The matchup is tough on paper. 19% target share for Freiermuth over the past 2 weeks. And Eric Ebron remained sidelined on Thursday, which does matter for Freiermuth. He went from he had the big game before the bye in week 6, but he ran a route in just 51% of the pass plays. That was up to 68% with Ebron out last week. So it definitely is a boost to Freiermuth if Ebron does not play on Monday night.
If it's close between Freiermuth and another tight end, and they're both on the wire, you have one rostered, I do think that there is a better chance that Freiermuth stays heavily involved going forward, with short range bends. So I think I chose him over, I don't even remember the decision now. But I think that helps him going forward. If you're deciding, he's a better chance of being that useful option the rest of the way.
Yeah, he Freiermuth and Arnold were the 2 guys I was grabbing off waiver wires this week. I think they're the 2 guys with staying power, who we know, again, could be lower end tight end ones the rest of the way.
Yes, I agree with that. Anything else from this game?
Nope.
That's going to do it for this Week 9 preview edition of the podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com now. See our full Week 9 rankings to help you finalize all your lineup decisions. Check the My Teams page to get those customized to fit your league settings. You can also find us anytime in the free DraftSharks Discord. You can find the link to join that in the description for this podcast, wherever you might be consuming it. For Jared Smola and the rest of the DraftSharks crew, I'm Matt Schauf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.